Hi. So, I've been struggling with social anxiety for quite a while now, and it's pretty much for a long time, up until like somewhat recently, it's been getting progressively much worse. And I've like over the last, let's say, like past year, let's, let's just say that, I've taken actions to sort of make sure it doesn't get worse. Maybe even gets a slight bit better. But pretty much before that, for years on end, it would be getting just constantly worse. So let's go over a bit of what happened. As a kid, before I even started school, it's like what I consider like, or what I mean by as a kid. Obviously, like a first grader is a kid too, but like before I started school, I certainly don't recall having any issues talking to people or just anything. I don't recall having any sort of issues socializing with others. And it's really when I started school that problems sort of slowly started turning up. One thing you gotta understand is that I was a really like wild kid. Like I was really when I first went to school, I'd like be like all over the place. I could not sit down and just study, and like for the longest time, like or like longest time, but like for a while, like people thought I had like ADHD. I don't, but that's just. I guess I'd just been brought up like very in a very free environment, let's say, where I was allowed to do kind of whatever I want, and then suddenly school started, and now I gotta sit down for hours, and it was a big change. And yeah, it's hard to say when exactly my, let's say, like social problems started, but like pretty much I gradually calmed down over the years. First grade, I was a horribly wild kid who probably made the teacher's head explode, honestly. And like second grade, a lot better. Like a huge improvement. Third grade, again, maybe not quite as big as from first to second, but like again, like a big improvement. And or improvement, well, yeah, improvement, being able to actually sit down at school. But like, I think it's somewhere either around like here, where I started calming down a bit, or like a bit after that, you could say my problems sort of start. So the being transitioned into this environment of just having to sit still for hours and not talk to anyone, just listen to the teacher. Like there was very little cooperation or like group projects or stuff. And like I find it funny because like later on I'd like grow to hate group projects. I'm pretty sure a lot of people who feel any sort of social anxiety like probably relate to that feeling. But yeah, like I feel like school didn't really teach us to cooperate or like to work together, but instead like work on our own things and like just be quiet. And sure, that has its advantages. I mean, you gotta be able to do things on your own as well. I'm not saying that, like, and I'm not gonna start criticizing the school system. Like, sure, there's a lot to improve, but there's also a lot that gets right. But I just feel like that may have been like kind of planting a seed of like social anxiety in me, of like just not interacting with people as much. Like the thing about like the very early grades is that I still would spend a lot of time after school with friends. So I would get a lot of socialization in. I would spend like hours playing outside and I had friends who lived like really close, and I went to the same school with, and got along great with. So that certainly helped. But as years went on, that started happening a bit less. And one reason probably for that is video games. Because as people, not just me, but like also me, but others as well, started transitioning into like spending more time inside playing games after school, less and less time was spent like outside. And like I've never been a very sporty person, never been into like what a lot of other boys in like my school would be in, like football or something like that. And by football for Americans I mean soccer. But like, yeah, like that would be that. I never was really into any sport. I mean, I used football or soccer as an example, but any other sport as well, I never really was that into it. So as soon as we kind of grew up out of that, like playing or like, playing games, playing like, not talking about video games, like when I say play, I mean like, how kids play with like toys and stuff. As soon as like we grew out of that phase, and people would kind of, at least in my experience, either they'd go to playing video games or they'd spend a lot of time playing sports. And me and pretty much all of my friends were more of that video game group, and that sort of slightly eliminated my social activity. And still, it's worth noting that for a long time I'd still like go to a friend's house to play video games and stuff. So it's not like video games suddenly came along and everything was destroyed because of them. No. The thing is, in 5th grade, I had a pretty big like bullying episode. In fact, I mean, it's really the only grade I've ever been like proper bullied in. And there were like, I'm not gonna go into too much detail, and I'm certainly not gonna say any names, but there were 3 people who bullied me. And one of them had been my friend in kindergarten, not really that much at school, though he did go to the same school. And one of them was a person I'd know, not from kindergarten, but like from living nearby and going to the same school. So people I'd known for a long time, and one of them, like a third one, was a person I knew from school. And I don't know what they had going on in their own lives. Certainly like complicated things, no doubt. But like, for whatever reason, they ended up bullying me. And that was sort of a period of where a lot of my socialization was cut off, because I didn't have as many friends at the time, because now I'd lost some of them to like bullying, and even the ones I kind of didn't, I mean, just the simple fact of everyone hanging around, that meaning like the bullies maybe among, or like hanging out with people I'd otherwise like be friends with. So that kind of like came in between. And like that majorly affected especially the time like outside of school. Because I mentioned previously that I'd play with people living nearby, or like go play video games at their house, or one of them was one of the people bullying me. So like that majorly affected like the 5th grade time of my life. And I'd like to certainly mention here that when 6th grade came along, the guy living very close to me actually came up to me and apologized, which I respect him so much for that. It's like it certainly takes like courage to walk up to someone whom you've bullied for like the past year and then just go like, yeah, like, I'm sorry. Like, I screwed up, and like, and I actually did forgive him, and I kind of got along from there, but it was never really the same after, which, big surprise. Not really. But it worked out. I mean, I still had friends, especially after this bullying like stopped. I once again kind of had this at least social circle at school. So I had friends at school whom I could spend time with on breaks. But outside of school, not so much. And I think that's a huge part of where like my problems start to slowly amplify. So it's worth noting that until 9th grade, I knew relatively the same people. Like, some people came, some people went, but pretty much I either knew the same people or I'd meet people based on whom I already was friends with. So yeah, and pretty much I've always made friends like in school. I never really made friends outside of school, once again, because I didn't do much at the time outside of school. Like, my time outside of school was spent playing video games, so yeah. This like me knowing the relatively the same people until ninth grade, all the way from like first and honestly even before that to ninth grade, that's gonna be relevant a bit later once we get to what happened afterwards. I like to I'd like to mention a few things like here somewhat in between first though. Like introversion and extroversion. I don't actually consider myself either, and most people aren't one or the other. Most people fall somewhere in between. I think the best like way to really explain what an introvert is and what an extrovert is like do you, let's say, after a lot of work, would you rather spend time with friends or like in a group or whatever, go and do something, or would you rather be alone and like, I don't know, read a book or something, whatever, play video games or like anything? So like either be alone or be like maybe like with one person or something. So like not be in such a group setting, not go and do a bunch of like stuff that kind of puts you in the middle of, let's say, attention. um, so obviously everybody needs time alone and time with others. That's like pretty obvious. Even if you're the world's most introverted person, you need time with others, and even if you're the world's most extroverted person, you do need time with like, or time just by yourself. And yeah, most people fall somewhere in between the two extremes, and that includes me. And that may feel somewhat surprising since like I like trying to explain how horribly socially anxious I am, but like social anxiety and introversion are not the same thing. I just have horrific social skills. And it's really at times I even like thought, am I more extroverted than introverted? But I'm just like so socially anxious, and I have such terrible social skills that despite that I like spend my time alone. I'm unsure. I mean, I enjoy time both alone and in groups. But part of that may be because like I said, everyone needs time in both, and mine is way too much alone. So it may just be that I have such a great desire to spend more time with people that therefore I feel like I'm more extroverted than I actually maybe am. Hard to say. But yeah. I think that's just important to mention. I'm not a super introverted person. I very much enjoy spending time with people. Even like, yeah, I mentioned like how I sort of started playing more video games instead of playing sports, which is more of a, you know, alone activity rather than like a group activity, but it was more about the activity itself. Even like playing video games, like always, I found it more fun to play like co-op, multiplayer, online, whatever. Like play with friends. That's always been the most fun in video games like ever. And like I've spent a lot of time playing like single player, but that's never been what's most fun. So yeah. That. Now like I like to mention that I grew up somewhat like overprotected, or like this may seem like somewhat weird because I said like grown up in a very like free environment. It's more so that like I wasn't so much like told what to do. Is like what I mean, and I had a lot of like freedom in terms of like what I wanted to do. Even things like, you know, most kids have like a restriction on like you can only eat like candy on like a specific day. I never had that, and it wasn't really required because I just didn't eat that much candy or anything. Like things like that were never an issue. So for whatever reason, I just kind of acted fairly like reasonably, despite being like raised in such a open and free environment where I could do a lot of stuff that I wanted. And maybe there's like some good parts of that. I mean, I certainly think there's like a healthy balance between like freedom and restrictions that you put on your children. And but yeah, what I meant by that bit like being brought up like overprotected, despite the fact that I absolutely think my mother did, like I'm from a single like parent household. I'll go into that real soon, but my mother did, in my opinion, a fantastic job for what she had. Like not the greatest paying job. She was really damn stressed, had a lot of her other own problems, and she did a fantastic job in general. That being said, nobody's perfect, and she's always considered, she even admits this herself, like she's very overprotective of me. She, like, as a kid, for example, I mentioned I'd play like with friends outside. Let's say we'd like go a little further. Like there's like this, how would I explain it? There's like this area a few 100 meters from here that's like it's got a bunch of fun stuff, let's say. No, but like it's there's kind of like a damn, how would I explain it? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter too much like what, but that's like a place we'd go quite often and like to play. And we had this sort of like rule that if I'd ever like go there, I'd always have to like send a message or call or something, like inform my mother about it. And whenever I sometimes wouldn't do it, she'd get angry with me. And like part of that certainly because she was already feeling so stressed on her own. So yeah, that's one example. Then just generally speaking, when she's always kind of done a lot of things for me, like I think one of the best examples is whenever we like not whenever, but like quite often, let's say we just talk with someone, whether it be a random person whom we know, whoever, and let's say something was asked, like from me, somebody that we knew or didn't know or whatever. A person asked a question from me. It was a fairly, and still is, a fairly like common thing for my mother to kind of just butt in and answer, not let me answer. It's just like, I think there's like a certain like level of taking away like the responsibility of my like what I myself would say or do in that situation type of deal. So like there were certain things that I was like where I had like a ton of freedom, and that certainly had its like ups and downs. I mentioned I was a super wild kid at school. That's certainly like a reason for that, because I had been allowed to do whatever I want for so long. I didn't really have that many rules. And then on the other hand, we had this like super overprotective, like there wasn't really like a healthy balance, if that makes sense. I had, in some aspects, I had so much freedom that I ended up being like the wildest kid in school. While on the other hand, I was so overprotected that I kind of never learned to, let's say, stand up for myself. Never like do things like, for the longest time, like I couldn't like let's say talk to people like in like formal situations. So like if I'd have to make a call to like, I don't know, school, or send a message or whatever, like that would always like stress me out a lot, because I'd never like been trained to do that from childhood, because my mother would always do that for me. And like it like sure, there's like a level of like sure, it's been like helpful in a way that like she did that for me, but like that also kind of meant I never learned to do it for myself. But yeah. Now then, I mentioned I've grown up in a single parent household. Um, so I do know my dad. I see him once in a while. A bit more when I was a kid, but honestly, nowadays it's like once or twice a year, so not very commonly. And I just feel like he's never had a ton of interest in really, let's say, being too big of a part of in my life. And part of me is like, okay, whatever. Like that's certainly not what I personally like, let's say, aim for or would want, but I can't force him to, let's say, be a part of my life. But yeah, due to not seeing him that much, him not being that big of a part in my life, I sort of lacked a like male role model for a huge chunk of my life. like you could sort of say I still do. And you know, it's just, generally speaking, a mother is a lot more like protective, whereas a father is a lot more like the figure that goes to you, like tells you to go and do it yourself. You know, if that makes sense. So yeah, I never had that. I think it's like, I think generally speaking, I mean, I think it's pretty much a fact that generally speaking, a family with a mother and a father is best. Obviously, there are maybe like there are exceptions. Like, I'm not saying that like people who beat each other all the time should be together. That like those types of things complicate things a lot. But like, if people just fight all the time and things get like violent and stuff, like, obviously that's a lot more complicated then. But generally speaking, a family is better off with a mother and a father. Specifically, the children are. And that is really what the family is for. Like, let's be honest. I mean, when you have children, your children are priority number one. That is just how things go. And yeah, so I, despite having, as I said, like a mother who really, really did her best, and I think she got a lot of things right. She's only one person, and there is that, like, she doesn't need to, she was never supposed to be both a mother and a father for me. So obviously, being raised in a single parent household meant I kind of lacked something, or like missed out on something. But yeah, it's a complicated mess. Now then, it takes me a really long time to open up to new people. This will become relevant very soon. Like, I just, I don't think this was really a problem when I was younger, like opening up to people. I think, like, I'm super unsure of how much like that bullying episode in 5th grade affected me, but this is one of the things where I actually think it certainly did. Like, having people whom I found like great friends, or like found to be great friends, like start bullying me, like, there's, I have a feeling that it made me a bit more, let's say, careful about opening up to people. And it's hard to say, because on a certain level, I don't think this is in any way like the only reason why this ended up happening. Because once again, like, I don't as much, or pretty much at all, remember having problems with this as a kid. But somewhere along the lines, this started happening. The bullying certainly probably affected it, like, to some degree. But I don't think it was the only thing. And this really complicates things because I don't know what else it was. I just know that from 5th grade to like 9th grade, I still made new friends. And it didn't take me like a huge amount of time to open up to them. But nowadays it does. And after 9th grade it did. So yeah, after 9th grade, high school starts. One major thing here is I've always been super bad at keeping in contact with people. I've never really been one to ask people out to do something. It's pretty much always me who has been asked to like come out and play. I never was the one who went and I was like, hey, you wanna come out and play? No, it was always I just kind of sat and waited until somebody came and got me. And that's very interesting. That's one of the things that like actually has been there since the very beginning, since my childhood. I don't know why this is. It's just kind of how I've always been. I never really learned to break that habit. Somewhat trying to do that now, certainly. But we'll see how long that takes. Yeah. So, due to this, I didn't really keep in touch with anyone. Actually, I just didn't keep in touch with anyone. Some people kept in touch with me for a little bit, but that kind of just, let's say, faded away probably due to me not contacting them. And I really regret that because I met so many great people, let's say from like in school, from 1st to 9th grade, and just pretty much giving all of them up. I really regret that. But yeah, that happened. High school started. I knew no one, basically. And I did actually start spending time in a group after a while, but I never really got to open up to them. And this is where this like opening up thing comes up. Something changed. Because like from 5th to 9th grade I still made new friends, but once I got to high school I just didn't really. Like I got to know people, I made like kind of friends, but not really people whom like I knew that well, if that makes sense. And I don't know, I just felt like whenever I'd be around them I just couldn't in like any way, let's say anything about myself. And that's actually going to be very important later, not being able to talk about myself. So also in high school I did join the school band, and like that's fun. I'm very into music. I certainly found that to be a lot of fun. But did I really like get to know people there? Not really, no. I just go there, I'd play guitar, and you know, there was like this song wish list that like you could wish for whatever song you want to be, want to like, if there's like a specific song you want to play in the band, and like we'd aim for like anybody who wishes to get at least like one song. I never wished. I wished for any song. Like I was there for pretty much all of high school, 3 years, and never did I ever wish for any song. I just kind of play whatever others wanted. Sometimes songs that I liked more, sometimes ones that I liked less. But that didn't really bother me or anything, but it's not that there weren't songs that I wanted to play. This comes back to the not talking about myself thing, where like I didn't want to, let's say, share my musical interest, if that makes sense. I was really afraid of sharing that in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, once again, gonna come back to that in a bit, but to put it simply, I was really afraid of people knowing who I was, knowing what I liked and what I disliked and whatever. But yeah, gonna come back to that. So, high school went by. Honestly, not too much happened. And then, like, let's say a third of a year went by. And I actually started working. Like, I got a job at a grocery store of all places, which may feel a bit surprising considering I'm talking about like social anxiety. But a part of it certainly was like if I put myself into these like social situations, like that's sort of bound to help. And in some ways it certainly has. Talk about that real soon. But I actually ended up changing jobs pretty quickly after my first one, but just simply to another grocery store, because my first one was like going to different stores, like depending on the shifts, and like basically covering shifts, and that was just kind of a mess because it was very like unpredictable, not too many shifts in general, and I never knew like the places I went to. So that was like just couldn't really, or didn't really want to keep that up. But yeah, then I got to one specific store, still am there, and yeah, like I said, it has helped in some aspects, like working. Like, I think social situations can kind of be put into two categories. There's like this sort of official setting, and then like a casual setting. I would consider any like, let's say when you're in school, or like you're like having a presentation, or you're at work talking to customers, you're calling a doctor, you're whatever, like these like, let's say, job related things where you're talking to people, where it's either their job to answer your questions or guide you or whatever, or it's your job to guide a customer. These sorts of things I've gotten a lot better at. Like, probably because due to work, I've put myself in these situations. It's a lot easier for me to do all these things. Like I mentioned a while ago, like, for example, making calls. Like as a kid, like my mother would do that for me. So like I never really knew how to do things for myself. Well, now I kinda learned that skill. I mean, it's a very specific skill set that you learn, like interacting with customers in a store, but still, like, that has helped. But what I mean by like that casual setting is when you're just out and about with friends, or you just randomly come across a person who like asks you for directions or whatever, like, or like somebody starts up a conversation with you, somebody you don't know, like these, once again, non-work related settings. These I struggle with a lot. I have a great lack in them. I don't have too much of them at all, and I've considered some sort of solutions to get a bit better. You know, like going to the gym, because that's like, there are people who are kind of also into like self-improvement there. So there's like immediate like that level of like same interest. And like even with YouTube, like one of the huge reasons why I started this is so I could like kind of get better at thinking and like talking. So I have this huge problem where like due to how little I've actually spent time talking to people, I struggle to put my thoughts into words. So YouTube actually helps with that. Yeah, there's also a book many of you may have heard of. I think I've got it here. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've got a Pikachu book mark, but like, yeah. This book is fantastic, and I've read it once. I'm rereading it. Like, I've got it on Kindle, the app on my phone, and it's honestly fantastic. It's got so many great things, but there are some things that it sort of misses in my personal situation. Because what goes on here is, in a way, like kind of advanced stuff. So, whereas my issue is kind of like not even being able to like talk to people in the first place, this book is more about like how to actually talk, let's say. A bit hard to explain what it is, but or generally speaking, like, this book is fantastic. I would recommend it for anybody struggling with any sort of social anxiety, social skills, whatever. I think it would greatly benefit you. So, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Fantastic book. And yeah, even like video games, because that's something I've spent for so long, spent a lot of time on, and that's like kind of been the only thing I know anything about. Um, Even like through video games, I've sort of tried to find ways to interact with people. So like whether that would be through chats or some sort of forum or whatever, you know, in like an online game. But that's never really worked out for me. And I'm certainly trying to change that at least a bit. Obviously, I play a bit less video games now than I used to back in the day. Quite a bit less, actually. But still, like I've mentioned, I haven't completely given them up yet. For multiple reasons. But that's not what this video is about. So yeah, I wish I could actually interact with people through them, but that's never really worked for me. So yeah. Before we go to like, let's say the end, I mentioned that or like I sort of promised to come back to the topic of, you know, being afraid of people knowing me. This is a huge part of my entire problem, and I cannot explain why this is. I've thought about it, I don't know what caused it, I don't know what keeps causing it, I don't know why I'm so afraid of people knowing anything about me. But like, even when people like talk about, let's say, something I'm interested in, a specific video game or anime nowadays, like self-improvement, like you'd think I could like join in and be like, kind of show my interest in the topic and like not per se like talk about myself, like even like in this book, you know, like asking questions of others, because that's a very good way from what I understand to actually like, you know, interact with people instead of talking all about yourself. Asking the other person questions and giving him or her the opportunity to speak about, you know, him or herself. Yeah, but when people ask me a question, because that's, surprise, surprise, sometimes happens, I have very hard time answering honestly. Or like, it's not so much that I lie, it's more so that I kind of try my best to dodge the question. Like, if somebody was to ask me, like, what I'm interested in, I'd probably answer with, I'd either say whatever, like, I think they will find most pleasing, or I just find a way to dodge the question by answering like some super generic stuff that yeah, maybe I'm into, but like everybody's into or something, you know, like, and they're super general, like, and it's once again this like coming back to like the casual settings thing. So when I'm talking to people, especially in a group, I just have such a hard time saying anything. But like, even one-on-one, like, I have such a hard time of bringing up anything in a conversation. It's always someone else who brings something up, and I'm just like, yeah, or like, no, or like, yeah, I agree. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. I don't know what it is about me and my weird psychology that sort of thinks that as soon as a person knows anything about me, especially anything like that they don't like, this is kind of like how my brain sees it, then they're gonna hate me. So like, as soon as I reveal anything about myself that the other person doesn't like, doesn't agree with, doesn't personally do, whatever, they're gonna hate me for some reason. They're gonna completely leave me alone. Like, I kind of have this like fear of being left alone, and like that's also like yeah, fear of people knowing me and hating me because of it, and like kind of leaving me because of it. So damn it, such a hard topic to talk about. Yeah. I'm really trying to like find any sort of reason why this could be, but I just can't seem to do that. I don't know why I'm so afraid of people rejecting me based on how I am. Like, even though I fully know that like people don't care that every single thing about you is perfect. Like, they don't, people don't even want that. Like, people don't want you to be exactly like, let's say, they are. Or if they dislike something about themselves, like exactly like they are, except that one thing that they dislike about themselves. Like, people are different. Everybody's different. And really, you just gotta find people that you're like similar enough to where you kind of get along. And like you have similar interests. And I know that's enough. You don't need to agree with everything. But for some reason, it's like, as soon as I say anything, I think they will immediately assume the worst. Like, it's like I somehow think that people will always assume the worst in everything I'd ever say. And that really leads to me not talking to people. Just staying quiet and not sharing anything about my life, because like, sure, like in a conversation it's great to ask the other person questions. They can talk as much as they want and like whatever. But like, if you're actually like friends with a person, like there's a certain level of like back and forth. Like, you sort of expect like both of you to like share things about your life, if that makes sense. And I feel like I'm completely incapable of that. I just can't can't tell anyone about anything that goes on in my life, because I assume that they are going to immediately assume the worst and just, for whatever reason, hate me. Yeah. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos over this, and like obviously read this book. And one of the things that constantly keeps popping up is, practice. Like any sort of like, you have like so many videos on YouTube about like how to improve your social skills. What's wrong with your social skills, and it's always like you just gotta practice. And I get that, like, obviously, but I don't even know where to start. Like, when you can't say anything, where do you start with practice? It's so goddamn difficult. Especially when like my biggest issue isn't like in these like I mentioned before, like formal settings, but these like casual settings. It's, I don't know. But yeah, I mentioned that I'd recently started like trying to contact people a bit more, or like practice being the one to contact people. And I'm working on that. I've got a friend whom I actually talked about this a little while ago. He mentioned how it kind of frustrates him how one-sided this like friendship is, in how he's always the one contacting me. And that's certainly true. But yeah, that was because contacting has been so difficult, and we talked about it for like a while, and since then I've tried to keep in contact a bit more. And it's gonna take time, but I think if nothing else, I'm getting a bit better about that as time goes on. Yeah. It's like, with the thing of people, or like me assuming that people are gonna hate me immediately, like I feel like I should somehow like try to focus more on what I've got in common with a person, rather than what I don't, and reasons that they would not like me. Even if like not per se dislike, but just not really like things, interests that we don't share. Like, instead of focusing so much on that, trying to focus on like, okay, well, we've got these things in common, why can't I just like be friends or even like acquaintances with someone based on the fact that okay, we've at least got like these things in common, like these similar interests. That's something I gotta try to figure out. And yeah, that's sort of summarized my experience with social anxiety. Um, quite a big mess, but I'll see what I can actually do to make it better. If nothing else, at least I'm better at formal settings than I was before. But and like I said, YouTube has helped me learn to talk a bit more, like express what I'm actually thinking a bit more. That's actually like a big reason why I started. So yeah. Well, all right. See ya.